Good morning again. Our reading today is from John 1:43 to 51. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" And Jesus answered him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." The word of the Lord.
Thanks, Paul. We're so glad you're here. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Scott. I'm echoey, apparently. I'm the next-gen pastor here at Trinity, and thanks for coming out. You know, it's spring, it's raining, but here you are. So when I was in the first grade, it was a badge of honor. We all used to have those little square metal lunch boxes with a handle on it, and who was on your lunchbox was really, really important. I mean, if you had Scooby-Doo or the Fonz or Wonderbug or basically anything from Hanna-Barbera at that time, you were in. And mine didn't have any of those things, but that was okay. I had a lunchbox, I can remember it was all black, and it had little college mascots all over it. Now, it was strange because my family didn't really follow college football. I mean, if it was football, it was the Giants, and that's how it was in our family. But here I had this lunchbox full of 100 little mascots that I had no idea who they were. And so, but I would, you're eating lunch, you had something to do, and I would stare around, and there was one mascot that I came back to. I had no idea what it was, but it was this kind of angry little sailor bear mascot. There it is. And I just would come back to this. I mean, I would open my lunchbox, and I'd pull out my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because you could bring peanut butter to school there, or peanut butter and bacon. Don't judge me until you try it. It's actually not terrible. Or liverwurst. I don't know. I was a weird kid. So anyway, I would eat my lunch, and I would just look around, but I would always come back to this one little logo on it. And it was I don't know, there was some comfort there. And don't worry, this isn't I had no friends except the angry bear on my lunchbox story. I had plenty of friends. But there was something about that little bear that I just kept coming back to it. And ironically, years later when I went to college, I'd forgotten about that bear. I went to a school that had a bear for a mascot, but it was a very different bear. It wasn't this bear. It was this realistic, growly bear. And I remember when I was walking around, I went to the spirit store. This is right in the beginning of my freshman year. I was I need some spirit stuff. And I walked in, and staring at me all over the place was this same little bear. And I was that's the bear from my lunch. This is the school. I didn't even have any idea. I just ended up at Baylor University, and that was Baylor's first mascot, which was, right? I mean, it was crazy. And I was telling a friend of mine this story recently, and he's yeah, it was God saying, "I see you." I was that is exactly how I felt at that moment, because it wasn't just a mascot. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was in that moment, it was God said to me, "Look, even in first grade, I knew where you were going. I had a plan for you. I had a direction. I had a trajectory for your life. It was already there for you." And it just felt like an encounter with God, just in that moment. And that's the story that we have today. We're in this series, Encountering Jesus, and we're talking about Nathanael, and Nathanael had an encounter with God, right? Something seemingly small, insignificant. Jesus is like, hey, Nathanael, I saw you under the fig tree. And he's like, you're the one that we've been waiting for. Because there was something about that moment that meant something to him, that he was seen. And so we've been in this series, Encountering Jesus, where we're looking at different stories in the Gospel of John. And we're basing it around the idea that a true encounter with Jesus leads to a changed life. And so when topics for this series were being handed out, we were going through like, okay, who are we talking about? Oh, Peter, I know about Peter. We know a lot about Peter, right? The feeding of the 5,000. Come on, I work with kids. We do that like once a quarter with the kids. And all of those things. But Nathanael, when I found out I was going to talk about Nathanael, I was like, yeah, let's see. What do I know about Nathanael? And the answer is not much. I mean, like he was one of the disciples, something he liked figs. I don't really know. But I started to look at that, and I was like, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go through the Bible, and I'm going to look up every mention of Nathanael, and I'm going to get a gauge on what this guy's life and ministry was like. And you know what I found? There are exactly 2 mentions of Nathanael in the whole Bible. There's the one we just read, this little story, and then there's the second one, and this, I'm going to read this to you, and you can take this in as the word of the Lord. This comes at the end. We actually read this. It's John 21. We read this last week. But here it says, after Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 of his other disciples were together. The word of the Lord. Didn't really give me much on this guy, did it? And so really, all we know about this guy, for sure, is that he was in the Bible, obviously, and he was a seeker, he was a skeptic, and he had an encounter with Jesus, and he was with the disciples at the end. And it's significant that John is the only one who records this story. Because in order to understand why that's important, just a little bit of understanding of the Gospel of John is really, really helpful. Because John is such a different gospel, right? He omits huge portions of Jesus' life. In fact, if you were looking for the birth of Jesus, you won't find it in there. You won't find his baptism, his temptation. You won't see any casting out of demons. There's no transfiguration, no Last Supper, no Gethsemane, or no ascension. None of that's in the Gospel of John. So why do we have the Gospel of John? Fortunately, he tells us. He said, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in the book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The reason John gives us this story is to point to Jesus, so that we who read these stories will see Jesus and have life in his name. Literally, as we're going through this series, you should be asking yourself, as we're looking at things like the feeding of the 5,000 or Nicodemus, it's like, how does that point to Jesus? How does that show me Jesus? How can I walk in that way? And in this story, Jesus sees and knows Nathanael and invites Nathanael to see and know him. And that's the same invitation that he offers to us, because ultimately, all of us are somewhere on that journey. So let's look at Nathanael. He was a seeker, he was a skeptic, he had a conversion, and he became a follower of Jesus. I mean, that's the sum total of pretty much what the Bible gives us about this guy. There's lots of tradition around him. You can look, and even that nobody's sure of. But first, he was a seeker. So we look to our text, and it says, the next day Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, follow me. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also in the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And any Jewish student at that time was looking for the Messiah. I mean, you can imagine what it was like. Maybe we probably can't, honestly, but under Roman persecution, these guys were a conquered people, and they were waiting for the promised Messiah to come and set them free. And we know that all these guys were from the same town, the four who are mentioned here. And probably they were part of the same synagogue. Probably they had, similar teachings. And most of them were fishermen. Maybe all of them were fishermen. We don't know if Philip was. We don't have a mention of that, but we know Nathanael was at the end fishing with them. And so you just get this picture of these guys out in their boats, pulling in the nets, talking about what's coming. I read, what does it say in the scriptures? What are the promises? Where's the Messiah coming? We're looking for them. And we know that Nathanael was familiar with the messianic prophecies, right? Because Philip, his friend who comes to him, he's like, we found the guy we've been reading about. Come on. He's only about a day's walk from here. And I think at some level, all of us recognize that we're seeking something. Now, not all of us start out on a path that says, I'm going to find Jesus. But ultimately, humanity is hardwired with that search for meaning, search for who I am. We do a lot with an organization called the Fuller Youth Institute for youth curriculum. I was just at a Next Gen conference, and Kara Powell, one of their directors, was talking about this project that they just did where they just interviewed thousands of high school students. And they were like, what do you want to know? What are the things that will bring you to Jesus? And they boiled it down. Pretty much they all fell in these categories. Who am I? Where do I fit? What difference can I make? Which is ironic because I feel like before they even asked anybody, they probably could have figured those three out, right? Because those are kind of the questions that we ask on a day in, day out basis. We may not wake up and think, I'm going to ask this question. But inside, there's that gnawing. Who am I? Where do I fit in? What difference can I make? And Nathanael was seeking. He was looking for a Messiah. But he was also a skeptic, because when Philip came to him and it was like, we found the guy, it's Jesus of Nazareth, he's like, well, hold on. He can't be from Nazareth. Can anything good come from Nazareth? And Philip said, come and see. And I was thinking, okay, what would that be like in our context? What would it be like to have Nazareth in our context? And all I could think of was my hometown, Norwalk. Just bear with me. They both begin with N. Yeah, no. But I don't know if you ever saw the show American Housewife. It was on in 2016. But it's this crazy show that I can't imagine anywhere else in the country they would find it as funny as I did. But it traced this imperfect family, these imperfect people, in the midst of the perfect people of Westport, Connecticut. And so they're talking about everybody's this. And then the one episode I saw, they had this alpha Westport couple, right? There's this is this is everybody down here, this is a Westport couple, and here's the alpha couple. And they were the ones who had the house that everybody wanted, and they were the ones that threw the parties that everybody wanted the invites to, and they looked the way that everybody wanted to look, they dressed the way that everybody wanted to look, and so it traces kind of the exploit of this alpha couple. And it gets to a point where he's under stress, the husband's under stress, and he says something in the midst of other people, and somebody goes, wait a minute. Was that a Norwalk accent that I detected? And he's like, no, wasn't that. And then finally they just coax it out of him, and he breaks down, and he's like, yes, I was originally from Norwalk. Oh. I was like, I can't believe this is happening right here. Can anything good come out of Norwalk? I don't know. But that's what it was like, that region of Galilee, that Nazareth, was kind of considered low, kind of trashy. Like, would anything good come out of Nazareth? In fact, it was so bad that when Nicodemus, who we're going to look at next week, when he was defending Jesus, all of his other Pharisees are like, "What's wrong with you, man? Are you from Galilee or something? Like, what happened? We used to think you were high and learned, but now you've gotten way down." And they also said that, come on, search and see, Nicodemus, no prophet arises from Galilee, which is something that Nathanael would have been concerned about too, studying the scriptures. He would have said, but he would have been from Bethlehem, because that's what it says in Micah. And he would have had some concerns. And instead of arguing with him, his friend Philip just says, "Hey, come and see." Now imagine if Nathanael didn't come at that point. If he was like, "Yeah, no thanks, man. I'm just going to sit here under my tree. I'm going to look for the Messiah." I just don't think such a great person would come from Nazareth or Norwalk or wherever. And in many ways, Christianity has become a type of Nazareth. Judeo-Christian values used to be the backbone of our society. But now, if we're honest, a lot of times in society, it's considered kind of low or common. And you'll hear things like, "Yeah, religion's okay for you if you need a crutch, but I find my answers in whatever: money, science, success, family, entertainment." But I would never look to Christianity for answers. I remember talking to a youth in my old church, and we were just talking, and she was telling me, this was in Westport, by the way, and she was telling me how just about fellow students at Staples High whose lives on the outside looked shiny and polished and looked really, really good, but they were just breaking down, like terrible things were happening in their lives. And I asked her, I was like, so when that happens, like when somebody who's been pouring themselves into something and chasing things that seem like the right things to chase, when that happens and it all collapses, wouldn't they look to somewhere like the church for answers? And she looked at me, she said, "Oh, no. I was like, "Why not? Like, why wouldn't you?" And she's like, "Because the church is the enemy. Like, that's how it's seen with all my fellow students. Like, that's the last place I would go. That is Nazareth, baby, and we are not going there." And so the fact that Nathanael followed his friend seems like a pretty big deal. Philip said, "Come and see." And so he did, doubts and all. And that's just like us today, right? You may have doubts. We all have doubts here and there. Sometimes we're skeptical. Wherever we are on that continuum, we're all trying to figure out Jesus together. But there's that invitation hanging out there. Come and see. Come and see Jesus. Come and see for yourself. Nathanael was a seeker. He was a skeptic. But when he went with his friend to see Jesus, at that point he had an encounter and he became a convert. Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there's no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" And Jesus answered him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And this is the encounter. This is the moment where Nathanael goes from no way to being face to face with Jesus. And this is the pivot, the place where his life flips right there. Jesus looks at him and says, "I know you." And then he tells him who he is. "You're an Israelite without deceit." He's like, "How'd you know that?" And he says, because I saw you under the tree. Now, do you know what was so special about that tree? Do you know what was so special about the fig tree? You want to know? I do too, because nobody knows what was so special. But it was something really personal to him. Like that little bear on my lunchbox. Like if I told you, like, look at this bear. Isn't this amazing? This was God speaking. You'd be like, no, it's not. But if you knew the story and you knew the context, you're like, whoa, okay, I see how that was a God like nodding to you and pointing to you. And so we don't really know what it was about this tree, but something so personal and something so meaningful to Nathanael happened in that moment that he went from, can anything good come from Nazareth, to, you're the one we've been looking for. You are the guy, Jesus. And his eyes are open for the first time, and he sees. And if you're a follower of Jesus at some level, you've probably had this experience. It could have been a dramatic, like, wow, the heavens opened up and amazing things happened. Or maybe it was just a slow awakening, which was kind of like that for me. You know, I had my fig tree moment at Baylor, of all places, you know, the one with the angry little sailor bear. And I was walking, and early on in my freshman year, I just had this revelation, like, I had been raised as a Christian, but I was a long way from home, and nobody was going to make me believe or make me go to church. And I realized at that point, I had to decide for myself. I have to settle this right now. And I literally sat down on a bench under a tree, and I said, this is it. I need to know if Jesus is real, then that's going to govern the way I live the rest of my life. And if he is not real, then that's going to govern the way I live the rest of my life. And I started pondering that and wrestling with,
I didn't get that.
Oh, sorry, Siri. Technology. Maybe Siri will get converted. It'll be amazing. Yeah. AI is everywhere. Oh, my goodness. So here I was under a tree at Baylor University, wrestling with these matters of faith. And I realized, you know what? Through it all, through that whole journey, Jesus had proven himself to me. I didn't have to decide this because I already knew. And that was my really kind of fig tree moment. And that did govern the way I lived the rest of my life. Because, see, the thing is, though, if this is true, then it makes a difference how we go from here, right? You can have an emotional moment. You can believe in history. Sure, I believe Jesus walked the earth. I believe that he died. Maybe even that, you know, I don't know how it happened, but he rose again. You can believe those things. But Jesus offers Nathanael something more than just belief, something more than just a moment, something just more than just a spark when it goes on. He literally says, follow me. Like, if you come with me, that's what he said to all the disciples. And he didn't really use those words here, but he said the same thing. He basically said that if you come with me, if you get to know me, then you're going to see even more than what amazed you in this fig tree moment. Just finishing out our story, Jesus answered him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You'll see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now that is an unusual thing for Jesus to say, isn't it? Hey, Nathanael, you think the fig tree is great? Wait till you see angels climbing up and down on my back from heaven. But that would have meant something to someone who had searched Moses and the prophets his whole life. It would have brought him right back to Genesis, to the vision that Jacob had. When Jacob fell asleep and God showed him this vision of a ladder from earth to heaven and angels ascending and descending. And Jesus flips it, and instead of saying there's a bridge between heaven and earth, he says there is a bridge between heaven and earth, but it's not a thing, it's a person, and it's me. I'm the bridge between heaven and earth. Get to know me. And he gives the disciples the same offer, right? If you read the Gospels, you'll see all the time. He's like, and he saw two guys, and he's like, yo, follow me. And that's the offer that he's giving us today too, right? Because it's more than just having that emotional moment. It's more than just believing in a set of morals and values. I mean, Jesus, he was probably a good guy. I can wrap my brain around that. It's an opportunity to believe in someone, to have an adventure with Jesus, who's the living God. There was a guy back in 1859 who was a tightrope walker, and he was named Charles Blondin, or the Great Blondin. Like, he's this famous guy. And he came to fame by crossing the Niagara Gorge on a tightrope. It was about 1,100 feet long on this rope, 160 feet in the air, and basically he would walk across it over the falls, and people were amazed. And then he started ramping it up. He started doing crazy things like, I did it blindfolded. I did it on stilts. I can't even imagine walking on stilts. There was one time where they said he brought a chair. He balanced the chair on one leg. He stood on top of the chair and balanced himself, all on a tightrope, 160 feet in the air. And he just kept ramping it up. One time, apparently, he carried an oven on his back. He stopped in the middle, made an omelet, had lunch, and then came back. Like, this guy was crazy. And I don't know what possessed him one day, but he woke up and said, you know what? I am going to give preachers the best sermon illustration on faith for years to come. And we're very thankful for him. And so I'm going to tell you what that illustration was. He came out one day, and he was pushing a wheelbarrow on the tightrope. And he pushed it there, turned around, and he pushed it back. Had a weight in it, amazing feat. Crowd cheering, yeah, that's amazing, you're so great. And he was like, how many of you believe that I could push a man or a woman across this gorge in my little wheelbarrow? And they were like, yeah, we believe you can do it. And he's like, good, who's gonna get in? Right? Not a hand went up. Nobody in that crowd was like, yeah, you know, I believe, but I'm not sure I want to bet my life on that. But the thing about it is, if someone had done that, I thought about that, like, what would I do if I was there? Would I go? I would not go. But I would want to go. Wouldn't you? Can you imagine what that'd be like halfway across when you're talking to this guy and it's just the two of you talking, and he's like, look, I know it's windy out here, but trust me, I got this. I know the rope is shaking, but trust me, I've got this. I'll get you across. I'll get you through this. We're gonna have an experience, and forever you would have that moment. What would we as Christians know if we were to trust Jesus like that with everything? I mean, can you imagine the dialogues you'd have with Jesus? Hey, Scott, I know it seems shaky. I've got this. I've got this. I'll get you across. I'll get you through it. I know it seems bleak. I know it seems like you won't understand it, but I've got this. And maybe we would see heaven opened up. And we would see angels ascending and descending on Jesus. And we would understand that the bridge between heaven and earth, it's not a what, it's a who. And he's right here. And we can have an encounter with the living God. And when we do, a true encounter leads to a changed life. Philip's invitation to Nathanael was, come and see. But Jesus' invitation to us is, come and know. Not a thing, not a truth, but to know him who is truth. And that's the invitation that we have today. To wherever we are on that faith journey, we may just be seeking, we may have just come in here by accident. I mean, I don't know where any of us are here, but I know that at some level we're all seeking. At some level we're looking for answers to the meaning of life, to the questions we have. At some level we're on that continuum. Maybe, like I can remember going to youth camps and getting saved every time, right? Just in case the last one didn't take. No, I'm going to get saved. Maybe we just need to say, Jesus, I need a moment. I need a speak to me. I remember my mom telling me that as she was on her faith journey, she read the entire New Testament and she just said, I want to believe this. I wish I could. But if it's really real, you're just going to have to prove yourself to me. And then all these crazy things happened. People on the street would stop her and say, hey, just so you know, Jesus loves you, cares about you, thinking about you. A friend of a friend invited her to a meeting where 5 feet away, some lady who couldn't walk stood up and got, just all these amazing things. And finally she's like, there's something going on here that I'm not experiencing in my life, and I'm missing it. And that's really where all of us are today. We have an opportunity to just say to Jesus, either I see you or I want to see you. Help me to know you so that I can follow you. And so we're going to transition into worshiping Jesus. And I encourage you in this time to just push everything else aside and say, Jesus, help me see you. Help me know you. Help me follow you. Amen.